A very good morning to you all from the ENCA Money Desk. My name is Ropiwa Madzena, and this morning we're focusing on property, where commercial property sales are on the rise as owners seek better municipal services. Now, many sell for what they can get due to market-related pressures as well. Let's get more from John Loos, who's a property sector strategist at FNB Commercial Property Finance. A very good morning to you, John, and thank you for joining us this morning. Let's speak about a general sense of what the third quarter of this particular report showed when it comes to property and exactly what sellers are doing.
Well, yeah, let me just say certainly overall sales are not yet rising. They rose a bit in the office space from a very low base, but not in retail and industrial. But the part of this report that we're emphasizing here today is more the motives for sellers selling in the owner-occupied market. That's businesses that own their own properties, and the reasons as to why they are busy trying to sell at the moment, sometimes to go into to just rent, but sometimes to relocate to other areas for certain purposes. And the biggest single reason since the beginning of the year, 44% perceived to be motivated, at least in part, by relocation to a place where there's better services, that's now council services or utilities services, be it electricity and water, or possibly better alternatives, I guess, for providing your own alternatives to, say, electricity. So the whole utilities and municipal services issue has become a key priority. It's the biggest percentage, 44% of sellers, since the beginning of the year, after heightened load shedding set in late last year.
And let's speak about the big metros that are considered in this particular survey, John, because that would say a lot about those specific services you talk about, and of course the issues around failing municipalities when it comes to providing those basic services.
Well, all of them, don't have the numbers in front of me per metro, but all of them are motivated significantly by this search of services. Even in city of Cape Town, you find quite a high percentage where services are reported to often work better. And I guess there it's possibly a case of who provides what. Where does Eskom provide the electricity and where does City Power provide the electricity? I think that may have a lot to do with it, although I don't necessarily know the exact reasons from the survey. But this is a key focus, and it's not only moving within metros. I think it's also moving between various regions. We've seen in our FNB studies from time to time that not only do individuals semigrate, as we call it, but a noticeable amount of businesses also migrate between councils, whether it might be from smaller rural towns in the inland regions to Gauteng, or from Gauteng to the Western Cape, or where do they expand their next outlet. We've seen quite a bit of this migration between centres as well, and I think a lot of it is motivated by at least the perception of where services are better or where they may be better in future.
John, how much of an issue is financial pressure on commercial property owners? I know we've had issues around interest rates of late, and just higher operating costs in general, if you consider the cost of diesel to have generators running on those properties during power cuts. So how much of an issue has financial pressure become for owners in this regard?
This is actually an interesting one. I would have expected it to be higher, but 30% of sellers motivated at least in part by financial pressure. So that's a very significant number, and that's the second biggest motive perceived experienced by brokers. Now, interestingly enough, before interest rates were hiked back in 2021, just after the lockdowns were still in place in part, this was nearer to 65%. This was the single biggest motive. It was the single biggest motive up until late last year, where the search for services became the single biggest motive. At the moment, interestingly, from quarter to quarter, from the second quarter survey to the third quarter, it went down slightly from 32% to 30%. Now, That's interesting because you would expect a lagged impact on finances from the interest rate hiking that we've had. But I think that this slight decline may be based on optimism regarding the financial future, because we've had interest rates now starting to move sideways, and there's a growing expectation that the next interest rate move will probably be downwards. So I suspect that a lot of owner-occupiers are seeing some light at the end of the tunnel in terms of interest rates, which are a key source of financial pressure, and may just be saying, well, let's just hold on. We don't need to sell just yet. Better times may be at hand in the not too distant future. I suspect it's more a future confidence related thing. Financial pressure is a significant motive still, but it's not the biggest one.
On that point, John, I want to just bring in a shock factor that could potentially have an impact on things in the short to medium term. The developments in the Middle East, for example, those putting pressure on the price of oil, and that has a ripple effect on the inflation outlook and what central bankers across the globe are likely to do in the short term. I know it's not reflected in this survey in particular, but do you think that it's something that could be considered depending on how long the conflict in the Middle East would last?
Absolutely. It is a risk. I mean, at the moment, perhaps the oil price rises you've seen to date since the start of this conflict haven't been severe, but you don't know. When there's a war situation, a conflict situation in the Middle East, a big oil-producing region, is that a cause of an oil price shock? You really just don't know. It's unpredictable. So it is an inflationary risk, so it does give a little bit of upside risk to interest rates, but at the moment it doesn't. It looks to be not too serious. I speak under correction, but 50 years ago in 1973, with the last big conflict, I think it was the Yom Kippur War. I'm not sure to what extent that had to do with the oil price shock shortly thereafterwards. But there was an oil price shock around about that time. I think the best one can do is say it's an inflationary risk and therefore an upside interest rate risk. But I don't think you can predict it at this stage.
Yeah. And then interestingly, John, the survey for the third quarter also found that the coastal metros continue to outperform the inland metros like Gauteng, for example. And I wonder, obviously this will speak to the service provision in those coastal metros, but with the recent extreme weather conditions in the Western Cape, for example, if this might change.
Extreme weather conditions come and go. And I think the big thing about extreme weather conditions is the council, the local government's potential to fix things. I think there's quite a significant degree in confidence in especially the City of Cape Town Council, but others as well, to manage extreme weather conditions and to deal with it effectively. Possibly in other parts of the country, there's not that much confidence in the council. So I don't expect that the confidence in a region like the Western Cape, where councils reportedly work a lot better than others, will be dampened by extreme weather conditions. They do come and go. It can, the weather, depending on how it plays out, that's a food price risk potentially, because it's an agriculture risk. So there are all these risks you've got to bring into play. But I think the longer run confidence in certain councils in the local governments in the country that work, a lot of them being in the Western Cape, I think that will be sustained. And there is unfortunately a lack of confidence at the moment in the Gauteng metros. And so we do see this sort of net semigration of skilled labor towards regions like the Western Cape, and possibly some business as well.
John, thank you as always for your insights on the property sector there. John Loos is Property Sector Strategist at FNB Commercial Property Finance.